deals like this we sign. Peter is in Oxford. Peter.
Hello, hi.
Hello.
Do you feel just as angry as I do? And having listened to Henry there, because what he's saying is so true. And I entirely agree with what you said about proximity and the importance of it. But I was just going to quote you one of the reasons why this deal is attractive, at least from the point of view of Conservatives. And it appears in Conservative Home, an article by Greg Hands, you may have read it, going back a few months. And he's speculating, I think as many Tories are, that Labour will be in charge very shortly and that they will want to bring us back into the customs union, if not the single market or the EU. And here are his words. He says, Labour would have to pledge to withdraw the UK from CPTPP, which would create a whole new trade disruption for this country and would certainly anger some of our closest allies around the world, like Canada, Japan and Australia. Now, that raises a whole range of things. One of the motives behind this whole scheme is to make really joining more difficult. And it does bring up the issue that the Tories, even if, and I appreciate your point that it's a long way away, but the Tories are actually frightened of future government bringing us back into the EU or closer to it. And I think that is an understandable fear, because it is now the will of the people, quite frankly. Most people, in recent opinion polls would like us to have closer links with the EU. And when they talk about the anger that will be caused in those specific countries by leaving the CPTPP, just think of all the anger that's been caused by our nearest neighbours, much more important economies from our point of view, essentially admitting that Brexit has been damaging to our relations, has been a source of anger for those countries that really matter to us, and, with whom our trade is highly important. There's this fantasy that somehow distance doesn't matter anymore. You know the phrase, geography is history. Yeah, and that might well apply to certain services, not all of them either, because a lot of services do require proximity, but it doesn't apply to trade in goods. And if you're going to trade in goods with countries that are on the other side of the world, the environmental costs of that are huge. This is a government which promised in Glasgow, irony of ironies, that it would reduce its carbon footprint. And here we are trading, or promising to trade with countries which are far, far away and will involve massive transit, massive delays, and also countries with whom we don't really have a great deal in common. The idea of it somehow a shift in emphasis to the Pacific Rim, that somehow this is philosophically something important to this country. Well, nobody voted for that. Nobody was asked that in the referendum. People didn't think that what leaving the EU meant coming into the embrace of a distant and equally, as it were, to coin a phrase, a dictatorial regime as the EU. In other words, one which would set laws which would bind this country. Nobody voted for that. And I noticed that there's been no talk of a referendum about joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Well, no. And I'm quite sure if there were one, people would be completely astounded at the thought that was a good idea. Yeah. So I really do think that it's lose-lose. And I think, when Kemi Badenoch appears on the radio and somehow says that we can't manage on our own, we need to be part of a larger association and so on, that's not what they were saying, those years ago when the referendum happened. They were saying quite the reverse, that Britain could stand on its own 2 feet. Well, no. Britain is discovering that it needs alliances. It's now forming alliances that are much less advantageous than the ones we're losing. And why should we stand for that? Just one final thing I was going to say. I mentioned the will of the people being we need closer links with Europe. Now, I'm part of the European movement who believe passionately that, a decision was made which was unwise. It's a failed experiment. It's time to revisit it. We now have the people behind us. And, our new vision for the future is that we will be fighting to implement the will of the people, which is to reverse this disaster. And it can certainly happen. It might not happen next year, but it happens sometime.
Well, Peter, what do you say? I've just had a text here from James in Dorking. He says, Lewis, we're out. Get over it. Well, what if he said to you, Peter, we're out, get over it?
But this is all very well, to talk about the referendum as if it's in a distant past and is somehow binding on us forever and ever. No popular vote is ever binding forever. You have an election, you have another election in 5 years' time, and you can reverse the decision you made. And, if you find that something was a mistake, if you buy a house and you find that it's not what you expected, you move out again. And we shouldn't feel that in some way this country has committed itself forever to a decision which it now recognises as an unwise one. I think the people who are saying you're out, get over it, are a diminishing minority. And of course, there are some people who always say that, and I think would never persuade them, but they're about a 30% of the minority of the people, and the vast majority, I think, are now recognising that we really do need to come back to it. I think the idea of rejoining is now back on the agenda, when, it was a word people didn't dare say. And the population are way ahead of politicians, both Conservative and Labour.
Yeah.
Politicians are afraid to say it. But in another few years' time, it will be number one item on the agenda. I'm quite certain about that, because people will see the validity of what you just told us in your very, very good piece earlier on.
All right, Peter, thank you so much. Very clear from Peter in Oxford there. Maybe you disagree. Good to hear from you if you think that the Trans-Pacific Partnership is the sort of Brexit deliverance we've all been waiting for. 0345 6060 973, 0345 6060 973. Text 84850, tweet at LBC for all your thoughts on that. Coming up first, though, Donald Trump says the witch hunt against him will backfire.